Hello and welcome to yet another tutorial by Davies Media Design. My name is Michael Davies, and in today's tutorial I'll be showing you how to create this, what I'm calling a disappearing hiker photo manipulation using GIMP. This is GIMP version 2.10.14, which at the time of this tutorial is the latest version of GIMP. This video is brought to you by whatfontis.com. If you're like me, you've spent hours searching online trying to find the right font using only a JPEG as a reference. Whatfontis.com's font identification service simplifies this process by using 570,000 index fonts from multiple font foundries to help you identify up to 60 close matches for your fonts in under 10 seconds. All you need to do is upload a photo that contains the font you want to find, identify the letters in your photo when prompted, and let their AI-powered font detector do the rest. Visit whatfontis.com in the description of this video for more info or to try the service out for yourself for free today. Alright, so as you guys saw before, this is the final photo for today's tutorial. And this is actually a pretty easy photo manipulation trick. It just takes a little bit of planning ahead of time with your camera. So what you need to do first off is you need to find a location, obviously, put your camera on a tripod, and you're going to want to take two photos at the same exact location. And so what we're going to be doing is creating a photo with just the background here, and then we're going to create a photo with your main subject. And then if I hold control and zoom in, it looks like the area between the sticks has disappeared and it reveals the trail behind the hiker in this case. And so that's how we get this cool effect where it looks like you can see through the hiker, but you can't really tell that these are two photos, one on top of the other. So to show you guys an example, here is the photo with my subject. This is a slightly different photo I'm going to try for the tutorial, but it was taken in the same location as the original. So here's the photo with the subject, and then here is the photo of just the background. You can see that when I cycle between these two, there's really not any difference here between them. The only difference is that there's something right here, which is actually a buck that cameoed the shot here. It photobombed my shot while I was taking these photos. But besides that, everything else is exactly the same. And let me just zoom out here and get the zoom back to the way it should be. So for starters, what you'll want to do is click and drag one of these photos into the composition where the other photo is. That way you have both of these photos inside the same composition. So I'll come over here to this tab that contains this photo. You can either click and drag the layer, or you can just drag the tag right here. The tab, I'm sorry. And so you're just going to drag this on top of the tab that contains the other photo, so the photo with my subject. And I'm still dragging my mouse, and I'll release it so that it ends up right here underneath my original photo. Now if I hide the top photo, you'll see that the photo behind it is our background photo. So there it is. The lighting is pretty much the same. There's a few things that are different in this photo as well, but it doesn't really matter. All that needs to be the same really is this little area right here behind the person, because that's really all that's going to show from the background photo. Once you have both of the photos inside of the same composition, you're going to want to crop the photo. So this is why we put both photos in at the same time. Whenever you crop a photo, you don't want to crop one photo and then crop the second photo and then join them together. You might get slightly different crops. So in this case, we're going to just crop everything at the same time. It's just going to simplify things and keep things more consistent. So I'll hit Shift-C on my keyboard or click over here on the crop tool. And you could choose an aspect ratio if you want. And in this case, I'm just going to check the fixed aspect ratio, and I will actually set this to something like 1920:1080. We'll go with more of a wide frame here for this particular photo. The other one I did sort of narrow, as you can see. This one I'll do more wide. Doesn't really matter, whatever you prefer. And this is a pretty large image here. Both of these are over 5,000 by 3,000. This is because my camera is an 18 megapixel camera. So both of these photos came straight out of the camera, as large of a format as I could get out of the camera. And I will include both of these images in the description of the video. Let me just increase this a little bit more. You can see the actual size of the crop down here. It's a little bit bigger than 1920 by 1080 still. So it's still a pretty large image. And I'll just click inside there to apply the crop. Hold control and zoom in a little bit. The next step is really up to you. You can either go right into the actual manipulation part where you erase the portion between the two sticks, or you can apply the actual image adjustments to your photo, which is what I'm going to do just to make things a little bit easier. So I'll start up top here, and I'm just going to come over here to colors, levels, and I'm just going to edit this like I would any other photo. And actually, let me start up top here. I want to darken this more, so I'm just going to very quickly go through this. I do have a tutorial on 10 steps for editing your photo. Definitely check that out if you haven't already. Come over here, crop the highlights a bit. And let's go over to the red channel here. And we'll move on to green. So there won't be a ton of edits with the green because there's not a whole lot I want to do to the green colors. And finally, we'll move on to the blue. I'm just doing a very rough edit. You guys can edit this however you want. You can take as much time as you want. And let me just come back here to the value and just brighten it up maybe a little bit more. All right, that looks pretty good, so I'll click OK. Now, of course, because we made these levels adjustments to the top photo, I need to do the same to the bottom photo. So I'll come over here to what's right now called the drop buffer layer. I'll double click on this and rename it background, and we'll rename this one subject. So I'll come over here to the background layer and go to filters, repeat levels, and that will apply the exact same levels adjustments so that the photos still look exactly the same. So we're just going to do that throughout, and I'm only going to make a couple more edits here to this photo. So I've really already color corrected this and everything. So next I'm going to go to color temperature, maybe make this a little cooler, maybe about right there. And we'll repeat this for the bottom layer. Go back up to the subject layer. This time I'll go to shadows, highlights, and just make sure that we recover a little bit more details in the shadows. We don't need to overdo it, and we'll just tone the highlights down a little bit. Adjust the white point, and I'll click OK. So I'll do the same on the background layer, filters, repeat, shadows, highlights, and we'll come back up to the subject layer. Next I'll come to colors and hue saturation. You guys know this is one of my favorite sliders that I like to use, at least lately. And so now I'm going to just try to adjust some of the colors here. So the red I'm going to turn up a little bit because there's a lot of colors in the subject's face here. And then I'll move over to yellow. So there's not a whole lot of yellows going on, at least not in the primary portion of the photo. There is a bunch of yellows back here in the trees and in some of the tall grass there. So we'll add a little bit of yellow. So I'm just going to actually leave the cyan here as it is, and we'll see how the blue looks here. If I turn the blue down, it makes it look a little warmer since we added that cool filter to this. We turned down the color temperature and made it look colder. So I'll just reset the color. I'm going to keep this with the amount of blue it has. And then I'll switch over to green. And obviously there's green in the jacket, but because that green is sort of like an earthy green, it's not going to get picked up too much by the true green channel. So there's not a whole lot of changes happening there. So I'm really going to keep most of these settings the same. Just a couple got turned down, and I'll click OK. Of course, I'll come to the background layer and go to filters, repeat. And you can always shift click on this eye to hide that top layer, shift click again, just to double check that everything's going well. And I will perform a few other image adjustments on this, but right now I'm going to skip ahead to the portion where I'm going to erase the area between the sticks here on my subject. So hold Control and zoom in. So I'm not going to straight up use the eraser here. What I'll do is come over to the subject layer, right click, and go to Add Layer Mask. And under Initialize Layer Mask 2, I'll choose White Full Opacity and click Add. So that'll add a layer mask. Of course, those of you who watch a lot of my tutorials know that layer masks are a non-destructive way of erasing objects on a layer. So instead of using my eraser tool and actually erasing pixels on this image, now I can just paint the color black on my layer mask, and anytime there's white, you will be able to see whatever's on that actual layer. Anytime there is black, it's going to hide what's on the layer. If you're not totally familiar with layer masks, I do recommend you check out my GIMP Book of Layers ebook. But I'll just come over and grab my paintbrush tool, and I'll increase the size of this for now, and I'm going to switch my foreground and background color so that black is now my foreground color. You can also just click this little icon here if you don't have those colors set right now. I have a pretty hard brush right now, so I'm just going to leave that as is. I could adjust that later, but I'll hold Control and zoom in, And making sure I'm clicked on the layer mask, I'm just going to paint black, and you'll see that as I do that, it's going to reveal the grass below as well as part of the trail. So it's making it look like my hiker is disappearing in between the sticks here. And this just makes it look like the sticks are like, you know, magical or something. And so I'm just going to, as I get closer, use the left and right brackets on my keyboard to increase or decrease the size of my brush so I can get in here to the more minute details. And I'll hold Control and zoom in. So obviously for this picture, I'm holding these sticks up, and it's going to depend where you erase based on how you have your sticks held up. I tried to keep them so that they weren't overlapping too many parts of, for example, my hand wasn't overlapping too much of my torso here. So I wanted to make it so that the sticks were the primary object that were overlapping in front of me. If I could have done this photo again, I would have moved my hand slightly over here and had the stick start about here, but that's all right. It doesn't have to be perfect. And this might be easier to do with a pen tablet if you have a pen tablet, but you can also use your mouse. And it's alright if you erase too much of the stick, because most people won't be able to tell that you've erased a lot of the stick. Plus you can always hit the X key, shift back over your color white, and paint that white back on your layer mask, and that'll bring that part of the stick back. So I'll hit X again to switch back to black as my foreground color. And obviously, as per usual, the more time you spend on this, the better it will look. So hold Control and zoom out. So there we have the lower portion. We still have to do the upper portion, so I'll hold Control and use my mouse wheel to zoom in. And I'll use the space bar. So right here, because there's part of my, I guess my armpit here and part of the backpack strap that are sort of sticking out here, and then we have my arm. You have to decide what part of this you want to keep and what you want to erase. I think I'll keep everything to the left of this black strap here. So there will be a little piece, you know, floating below the stick, which is fine. You can also sort of round this part out like so. But that'll be up to your guys' discretion as to which parts you want to keep. And I'll hold Control and use my mouse wheel to zoom out. So there we go. That looks pretty good right there. You can see the path behind me there and some of the tall grass and the trees. So it creates a really cool effect. We're not quite done yet, so I want to make this look a little bit cooler. So as of right now, the sticks are still a little dark, but I don't want to keep lightening up the rest of the image. I just want to brighten up the sticks themselves. So what I'll do is I'll use the scroll wheel on my mouse to zoom in, and I'll come over and click on the original layer. And I'll come over here and grab the dodge and burn tool. So this tool, of course, as I've mentioned in previous tutorials, is going to emulate the dodge and burning practices that used to occur inside a darkroom. So it's either going to brighten part of the image if you're using the dodge tool, or it's going to darken part of the image if you're using the burn tool. So hold Control and zoom in, and I'm going to use the left bracket on my keyboard to decrease the size of this. I'm just going to scroll down and switch over to dodge. And you can adjust the exposure here. This will basically adjust how strong this effect is. And you can change the range you're on. So right now I'm on the highlights, which means whatever I paint over on the stick that has a highlight is going to brighten up. And let me just increase the exposure a bit. So you can see that wherever I'm painting, the stick is getting brighter. And of course, if you want to further make this stand out, you could switch over to another part of the range here, so maybe the midtones. And now any of the midtones here will become much brighter, and I'm going to decrease the exposure for the midtones because it does show up a bit more for the darker parts. And even that's still too much, so I'll turn it down a bit more. There we go. And we don't want to brighten it too much because it will start to blend in with the green color above it. So we're just trying to brighten it so that it's easier to tell that the stick is there, so we're creating a better boundary there between the person there and the stick. Let me decrease the size of my brush, and you can even paint other parts of the stick. So right there. And if you want to, you can come out there and paint the ends. But now I'm just going to hold Control, zoom in with my mouse wheel, and we'll do this bottom portion here. There's probably more shadows and highlights than midtones on this one. And let me switch over to shadows here, and we'll keep the exposure pretty low. So we'll just paint on this. I'll hit Control Z. I still want to only paint, one side of the stick. I don't want to paint the entire thing because then it'll not look three-dimensional anymore. It'll look a little bit flat. So hold Control and zoom out. So next what I'll do is I'll sharpen the photo, and I'll use the high pass filter to sharpen this, and then after that I'll apply a vignette. And so for starters, I will duplicate the original subject layer, and I'm going to click on the layer. So I'll right click on this and go to Apply Layer Mask. So that'll merge the layer mask with the original photo. And now I'll come over to Filters, Enhance, High Pass. So the purpose of this tool is going to be to sharpen the edges of objects. So you want to just tweak the adjustments on here. You want to tweak the settings until you get some nice sharpened edges around your key objects. So for example, the main subject here is probably more so what we want to look at. So we're just going to maybe turn this down a little bit. And I'll just actually increase the contrast just a tiny bit there and click OK. So hold Control and zoom out. So now you can see the edges are nice and sharp here around everything in the image, at least the main parts. And so now I can come over here to the mode, and I'll change the mode to grain merge. And so that's going to create a nice sharper image here. So here's a before, here's an after. Might be easier if I zoom in a little bit. So before, after. And of course we need to do the same to the background layer, so I'll duplicate the background layer, and we'll come over here to Filters, Repeat High Pass. You can see just that part behind the main subject there is displaying right now. And then I'll come over to the mode, and I'm going to change this once again to Grain Merge. So now both our background layer and our subject layer have the high pass filters on them, and that allows both of these image layers to be sharpened. So finally we're going to add our vignette, our finishing touch. So I'll come up to the top and create a new layer, and this one's already named Vignette, so I'll click OK. Hold Control, use my mouse wheel to zoom out a bit. So now I'll come over here and go to Filters, Light and Shadow, Vignette. And there we have a nice vignette. I'm going to increase the radius a bit so that it's not quite as noticeable. And we'll adjust the softness and the gamma, both of which are going to keep the black from encroaching too much on the main subject here. So the goal is to frame the subject and not to cover the subject up. So here's what it looks like before, here's after. You can probably decrease the radius just a little bit, bring it in a bit more, maybe about right there. So I'll click OK. And actually the last thing I want to do is just turn the overall saturation of this photo up a little bit. So we adjusted the saturation of individual color channels, but now I want to adjust all of those channels at the same time. So I'll come over to our main subject layer and go to Colors, Saturation, and I'm just going to turn the scale up here. So usually I would do this earlier in the process, but sort of skipped over that part earlier, so we'll just do it now. So we don't want to overdo it, but that's looking pretty good there, maybe about right here. And I'll click OK. And we'll apply that same thing to our background layer. So I'll go to Filters and Repeat Saturation, and there we go. All right, so that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, you could subscribe to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/daviesmediadesign. Don't forget to click the bell icon to be notified each time I have a brand new tutorial. You can also check out any of the links to my resources in the description of the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.